Good afternoon. Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special guest, Chris Williamson, host of the Modern Wisdom Podcast, a good friend of mine. We had Friendsgiving together, and now you're here in Austin. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we should just shout it. I don't know why we're not just yelling it out of our windows, and we could record the podcast that way.
So we're just talking about that you are about to get a haircut. I didn't realize that you're a fellow tribesman. What shul have you been going to here in Austin?
I've just been trying to avoid you. So whichever one that I've GPS tracked your little shoes, and I just try and avoid that.
Well, you're doing a bad job of trying to avoid me because you're blowing up my phone a lot. So that's really not how it happens. It's like, so what you were telling me, which I thought was very interesting, is that Americans have a very inaccurate perception of the lockdowns going down in your shithole country of the United Kingdom. What is the status quo there, and what took you so long to get to the States? Can you explain it to people?
Yes. So this is prior to the Omicron variant coming through. Everything's just changed recently. But prior to that, we had fewer restrictions in the UK than you guys do in Texas. And when I said this after our episode on Tim Pool, sat around a table with a bunch of people that are quite proud Texans, I think that went down a little bit badly. Everyone there seemed to think that the UK is some sort of Australia Part 2, this sort of locked down penal colony with police roaming the streets and bans. In Austin, you need to wear a mask if you want to get in an Uber. You don't have to do that in the UK. In Austin, I went to go and see my buddy Daniel Sloss perform at the Paramount Theatre. I had to show proof of vaccination or a negative test to be able to get in. That doesn't happen in the UK. However, because of this new Omicron variant, which, by the way, I know that this is the way that the Greek alphabet works, but if you have a pathogen that's ravaging the entire world, don't use the term Omicron, because that sounds like one of the evil villains out of a Spider-Man movie. Like, just skip it. Pick the next one that's Lander. No one's scared of it.
They skipped G because it's the Chinese prime minister.
Okay, so they skipped someone, but they didn't skip the scary thing. Right. So,
well, I mean, you're making it sound like they are trying to downplay the fear as opposed to the incentive is to increase the people's fear. And the second that there was a new variant named, it just became synonymous in the minds of most people that since it's new, therefore it's dangerous and deadly and different, in the same way that everyone who's blue-pilled thinks animals are all either domesticated or endangered. Like they like, if we're hearing about a variant, it must be worse. It can't be a new variant that's safer.
So the scary name actually plays into that.
Do you disagree?
No, yeah, I do completely. It's me thinking what I would like to happen, not what the powers that be would like to happen.
Yeah. So, and now you can make the argument very easily that there's a use to make it scarier because we want people to take it seriously and we don't know what it is and so on and so forth. But it certainly is not disadvantageous for them to have people in a state of fear. So you're saying about the UK?
Yep. And then there was a travel ban from the Shenzhen zone over to the US. You couldn't fly in. Now, I could have gone from the UK to Dubai for 14 days and then which again, even the fact that you can get around something simply by flying to another area for 14 days just shows how fragile and kind of pointless the system is. It's not about who you are. It's about where you fly from, which is a completely arbitrary rule to make. But I was able to come out. So 4 days after the travel ban got lifted, I was in your fair city. And it's really, really nice to be here, man. But this new variant, I think, has thrown the UK back into turbulence. We're now on the red list. The UK is on the red list to fly into Switzerland. People can't go in there without being quarantined. There's masks now being required on public transport and in supermarkets. And Iceland, which is, I guess, it's just a supermarket chain in the UK, the most recent... Can you hear that, Michael?
I think that's Brett. Brett, is that you? Now it's back. Okay, thank you. Leave that in, please.
The CEO or the owner of Iceland has said that he's not going to make people wear them. Now, I know that in America, it's quite common.
Wait, you have a supermarket chain called Iceland in the UK?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't sell anything Icelandic either. It just sells stuff that's frozen, which...
Oh, so it's like Iceland, not Iceland?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, okay, but it's spelled the same. Okay. They've co-opted an entire country. And he said that he's not going to force people to do it. Now, I know that in America, it's quite common to have discontinuities between perhaps what the central government, what the state legislature, and then perhaps private companies as well. You know, you have people like Ben Shapiro saying we will not comply, and they actually get their supporters to come and sort of rally behind them, and they push back. That's super rare in the UK, incredibly rare. So for a supermarket chain, there will be hundreds of these across the UK in pretty much every town and city. For him to come out and do that is a pretty big deal.
So you were also saying that unlike in Australia, there's absolutely no, I wouldn't say possibility, but there's no will among the populace to have another series of lockdowns, that this is kind of a DOA concept, correct?
Do Australia want to have lockdowns? Or do you mean from the government?
Yeah.
Yes. I think that Boris, after the sort of fluffs of last year, I think Boris played it pretty well. He's been more liberal than Scotland and Wales. Both of those places you need proof of vaccine or get negative test to go into things like nightclubs and cinemas. They've got masking in certain areas as well. That hasn't happened in England. And I think it would take a lot to put people back into lockdown. Also, you've got such high vaccine uptake in the UK. I want to say it's about 83% double vaxxed, which is really, really high, especially when you compare it to this country. I think that because you have people that have already paid that price, if you ask them to have got vaccinated twice, then potentially consider a booster and then go back into lockdown as well, I think that's going to be seen as so egregious that it's maybe not even an option.
One of the things that you recently did a TEDx talk, it was Newcastle, TEDx
Correct.
Newcastle, and you sent it to me. I watched it. I thought you did a great job, but I completely disagreed with your premise, and I thought this would be a good chance to break it down. Can you tell the audience what the gist of your TED Talk was?
Yes. So I realized throughout my 20s that I'd played a persona being somebody that I thought would be liked by other people in the hopes that that would be the sort of person that would find success competitively, success socially in relationships, and fulfillment spiritually. Can you explain, like, this is like for a lot of people in their 20s, that's not at all unusual. Like you think, all right, I have to be this kind of figure and this is going, and it never works. I shouldn't say never, but it's almost always counterintuitive, because even if it works in the sense of getting friendships, the friendships are going to be fraudulent and there's going to be a lot of self-loathing involved. What did you think you would have to be in order to be someone who is like, what persona did you feel you were playing? So for me, it was a party boy, big name on campus. My self-worth was created by the girl that I was sleeping with, or how busy my club nights were, or how cool people thought that I was, or how many people knew my name, or whatever. And yeah, maybe with the benefit of hindsight, you've said, this is what everybody in their 20s does. They try to find a persona that's liked and then realize that trying to be liked is the wrong way to go about it. But to me, it was a revelation, and it's kind of just a story of that happening. And yeah, the synopsis is that if you want to try and be competitive in the job market, then that's not going to happen by trying to be like everybody else, because your unique offering is yourself. Nobody can beat you at being you. That's the thing that you bring to the market, is your unique combination of skills and talents and genetic predisposition. The same thing goes for relationships. If you're trying to get into a relationship with someone, you've never fallen in love with someone and said, you know what it is? I just really adore the way that their opinions are so predictable. I love the fact that I know one of their views and can accurately work out what the rest of the things that they're going to say about the world are. Again, we love people for their uniqueness and their flaws and their idiosyncrasies, or at least I think so. And then when it came to spiritually, you're compromising the genuine person that you are. There's this story about Salvador Dali that he's probably one of the most eccentric people that I've ever read about.
Sure, of course.
He, just as some interesting stats about him, his parents had a child 9 months before Dali was born called Salvador Dali, and that baby died, and then the mum got pregnant again, called the second son Salvador, and were adamant that he was the reincarnation of their dead baby. He used to throw himself down the stairs as a child because he was so masochistic that he enjoyed the pain of being throwing himself down the stairs. He once locked himself in a deep sea diving suit whilst giving a talk and had to be wrenched out of it during it. But as brilliant as he was, Michelangelo didn't do Dali and Da Vinci didn't do Dali. So if Dali hadn't fully embraced all of this weirdness to manifest forward and create the person that he was, which enabled the work that he did, the world would have been fundamentally less complex and beautiful. He would not have spoken forward what he was able to do if he had tried to be something else. And if we want to have a beautiful, fulfilling, varied world where everybody manifests what only they can, then people need to stop curbing the edges of their uniqueness. And that desire to be liked over a desire to be truthful and honest to yourself was kind of the story of the talk, I guess.
But this is where I'm seeing a huge disconnect, because Salvador Dali was a once in there's only been one Salvador Dali. There only will be one Salvador Dali. He was a unique, amazing talent. Another fun fact: he had a an alter ego named Avita Dollars, which is an anagram of Salvador Dali because he loved money so much. That was his persona. And he was friends with Warhol, and he had a very eccentric look and manner about him. But when you're an artist, and he was one of the first, if not the first, I know Jackson Pollock did this to some extent as well, and so did Warhol, who realized I'm selling myself as well as my art. That if I am a person whose name gets headlines, if I'm seen at parties, if I have a reputation as this eccentric figure, it's going to make my art increase as well, which is not to take away from his unprecedented artistic talent. Ayn Rand, who's, I'm writing about her in The White Pill, one of Dali's paintings was her favorite. And she's a hardcore realist, but the Christ painting, I forgot what it's called, was she regarded as her favorite painting. You could see it at either the Met or MoMA in New York City right now. But Dali was an amazing figure who had a lot to offer and saw things in an extremely unique way. I don't understand the claim that the vast majority of people, or even a majority of people, have something unique to offer. And in fact, I think a lot of people fall in love with someone whose views aren't predictable because it makes them feel safe. And it's like, I know this person shares my worldview, so I can rely on them.
Perhaps this is my bias speaking forward then. Maybe this is me extrapolating what I want for myself and what I want in other people that are around me. Like, I'm friends with you, right? I haven't chosen to have friends that have got predictable views.
Sure.
So maybe I'm erroneously using my mental state and thinking that works for many people. However, I don't think that you can argue that the world becomes a better place by people trying to embrace what they've got as opposed to trying to copy other people. If you try to be Joe Rogan as a podcaster, the very best that you can hope for is being the second best Joe Rogan in the world.
Sure.
And that works.
You mean Lex?
Just show them love. 110111.
Yeah.
His tracker will be going off, the chip he's got in the back of his head.
Yeah.
Trying to be another version of someone else is always going to result in failure. So for me, it was a call to arms for people who know.
But you're saying it's always going to result in failure. And first of all, being the second best Joe Rogan isn't failure, right? There's lots of times when, for example, the store brand, right? Instead of me buying Marmite, I'm buying Boots brand Marmite. It's not a failure. It's going to compete in terms of price. So if someone has no personality of their own, if they're going to, this happens a lot. I'm sure you saw this in your nightclub days when people had no personality and they just figured they watched the TV and that basically programs them into how they laugh and how they talk and what their views are. But that's, in some senses, it's better than who they are, which is a person without a self.
Existentially, do you think that fulfills them? Or do you think that they're incapable of assessing whether or not it's fulfilling them?
I don't think some people are capable of being fulfilled.
Okay. Well, in that case, this talk wasn't for them. This talk isn't for you if you're unable to accurately assess whether or not you're speaking your logos forward, right? If your innermost truth, this is a talk. It was a call to arms for people who realize there is a disconnect between the person that they are publicly and the person that they feel privately, because that was me. So I was on this reality TV show and I'm there surrounded by these people that were the person that I thought I was, right? These big name on campus, super extroverted party boys and party girls for 3.5 weeks with no contact to the outside world, no books, no TV, no internet, no nothing. And all you're allowed to talk about is what's happened inside of this villa. And
you're not allowed to talk about like TV shows or like movies or anything?
Well, I mean, you can do it, but they'll come over the tannoy and say, Islanders, can you please stop talking about the outside world? Thank you.
Are you serious?
Well, because that's not content. They can't broadcast me talking about how much I love fucking Jordan Peterson's most recent TED talk or whatever the fuck. Like they can't broadcast that. They need me and you to talk about the fact that we fancy that girl over there and how she totally mugged you off last night, bruv, and how I'm going to get with her later on, bruv. Like that's what you need. So it's 24 hours a day of you constantly trying to talk about things which have only occurred within.
But how is that even possible?
Well, they just it's not as if it's mandated.
No, but I mean, like, just psychologically, like, that seems like torture.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would be to you, but to some of the people that were there, it was, I don't know. They seemed to tumble into it far easier than I did.
Okay.
So I'm in this situation surrounded by these people, and I'm like, right, I thought I was them. I thought that this was my world, right? I thought I was the fucking king of this world because I'd kind of dominated nightlife in a city that has about 1 million people, and I'd ascended to this sort of status position. And I just realized that wasn't me. And I was like, okay, there is a problem. There is a disconnect between the person that I think I am and the person that I truly am. And that's the story there. Now, do you know what it is? I think that you're right. Maybe the more normie people out there don't have the capacity or the will to do that. And maybe for them, it is better to be the second best Joe Rogan in the world, or to take their programming from what they see on TV. Because if you are so bland and gray and vacuous already, a little bit of spice perhaps adds something to you and actually creates the simulacrum of a persona. But if you believe that you have something to add to the world, like a Dali, then you need to not do that. You need to make sure that you are able to fully embrace everything that you've got.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Now, we all want to make sure our family's protected in medical emergency, and what many of us don't realize, health insurance won't always cover the full amount of an emergency medical flight. Even with comprehensive coverage, you get hit with high deductibles and copays. That is why an Air Medcare Network membership is so important. As a member, if an emergency arises, you won't see a bill for air medical transport when flown by an AMCN provider. And best of all, a membership covers your entire household for as little as $85 a year. AMCN providers are called upon to transport more than 100,000 patients a year. It's coverage no family should be without. As a listener of our show, you'll get up to a $50 e-gift card with new membership. All you have to do is go to airmedcarenetwork.com/malice and use offer code malice. Hey guys, we got a different kind of sponsor for this episode. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you really should be listening to. Every day someone tells you have to listen to this podcast. You have to listen to Your Welcome. You have to listen to Part of the Problem. Those people don't know what they're talking about. Jordan Show, which Apple named one of the best of 2018, is aimed at making you a better informed, more critical thinker so you get a sense of how the world actually works. Each episode is a conversation with a guest, and there's something for everyone. One episode, he's talking to a hostage negotiator from the FBI. Another episode, he's talking to a cinematographer who discovered a lost city in the jungle and made a major archaeological find. We really enjoy this show here at Podcast One, and think you will as well. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And here are some URLs to get more info. If you go to jordanharbinger.com/subscribe, you can download it there. Apple Podcasts at jordanharbinger.com/iTunes. And to learn more about Jordan as a host, jordanharbinger.com/about. Let's get back to the show. Well, let me both agree and disagree with you, because this takes me back, and I've told this story several times before, when I first got the idea to become an author. And I had the idea because I did stand up for a few months, and it was very jarring because the same jokes that would kill one night would walk the room the next. So to have the same material have such disparate outcomes really did a number on me. And I also came to realize that, my kind of cerebral, really out there sense of humor doesn't fly when it's a room full of people from Jersey who are out Friday night drinking, maybe on a date, and they want to hear dick jokes, right? And I thanks to my pompous attitude, I thought that stuff would be too easy, but at the same time, that's what they want. So was a real disconnect. And when I started wanting to become an author, there was a book that was heavily recommended by Chuck Palahniuk, who I think is a brilliant author in terms of concept, and a really not very good one in terms of execution. He has great ideas. Like Fight Club is one of the few movies where I think it's hard to argue that the movie isn't head and shoulders above the book. And he's got several other books to his name, which have great plots, but it's just not well executed. And he recommended this book called Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. And I read this book. It's a selection of short stories, which was made into a superb movie, by the way. And it made me want to quit before I even started. I didn't realize he's like a national poet, that was his background, because I thought to myself, I can never be as good of an author as this. It's never going to happen. And it still hasn't happened. But then I realized, well, I don't have to be as good as Dennis Johnson. You know, when I first started lifting, I went with my buddy Matt Hughes, who was a UFC fighter. And I'm like, and he was very supportive. And I'm like, I don't have to be a world champion fighter to be improved at the gym. You know, we set ourselves up. And again, you're not saying this at all, that you have to be Dali to be unique, but we certainly have the capacity to be more unique than we are. But I think I've had this argument with a lot of people, so let's suss this out, because I'm not sure where I stand. I think there is a large percentage of population who compete on conformity, and that if they demonstrate submission like dogs do, you know, and they kind of watch the same shows, they have the same quips in the same syntax. You see this on Twitter every 5 minutes. I'll take something that didn't happen for $500, Alex. Alex Trebek has been dead for quite a while, and so has this joke format, but they still use it. And this is like a simulacrum of personality. But I think for many of these people, and you tell me if you haven't seen this in your nightclub days, you take away this simulacrum, there's literally no one there.
Yeah, I think the people that I've chosen to surround myself with just don't fit that mold.
Right.
And maybe I see this on the door of my nights, but these kids are aged 18 to 22. So, I mean, you know, you're a child that's legally allowed to drink in the UK. What hope have I got for you to have found your inner self here? You're just watching someone learn about the world. It's the first time they've been out with them and a girl. It's the first time they've been out on a birthday. It's the first time they've been out in fancy dress. So as people are exploring the territory, and maybe here's something that I think about a lot, man, like how much I believe that the really important existential world wisdom ideas that I come upon are genuine insights that I've worked at, and how much of it is just a byproduct of fucking getting older. Like because you'll never know. I'll never know how much of the inner work and how much of the reading and spending time speaking to you and working through stuff, how much of that contributed to it, and how much of it would have just come along for a ride, the same way that a light gives off light, but it also gives off heat as a byproduct. Maybe the wisdom that you incur is just a byproduct of getting older.
No, I think it's both, obviously, but I don't think it's a byproduct, because obviously as we get older, we have more data, but it's incumbent on all of us to sort through this data and make it coherent, as opposed to just sweep it under the rug. This happens with relationships, happens with work. There are things now as an author having done, I literally don't even know how many books I've done. It's probably 10. I'd have to sit down and count, but things that are second nature to me, that right away, if someone has never written a book, I can spot and be like, you know, this is kind of amateur stuff. That's, you know, there's so many red flags. A big example to everyone out there: if you're writing a book, do not break the fourth wall and speak to the reader directly. Like if I see someone say, you're probably thinking, you're the author, you're giving a monologue. This isn't a dialogue. I literally can't respond to you. Don't tell me what I'm thinking, and don't tell me what I'm probably thinking, because I'm one person. It's not a statistical population. So that's an easy one on top of the head that people who are newfound authors often make as a mistake. I'm also curious, do you think that there is a big difference in terms of being culturally homogenous in the UK versus the US?
Oh, massively. Yeah. The UK is just so much smaller. And if you look at the population density, so how many people on average per square mile of territory that country has, it's not even, it's like 1/10 or maybe 1/50th, I think, is the difference. So you guys we're about 60 million, you're 330, and the population density is so much different. So you just have people crammed into this very, very small space. Now, an interesting thing is that we've retained accents. So you can go 50 miles and hear a completely different accent. Liverpool and Manchester are probably only 30 miles apart, or maybe even less. And even you would be able to pick up, well, actually, you're educated in UK stuff, but any American will be able to go, I know that and that sound really, really different. I'm not sure that the same thing occurs in America, but culturally homogenous, everybody watches the same shows. We don't have the same... Here in the US, people's political affiliations change the sort of stations that they watch, specifically to do with news. We don't really have that in the UK. We've got GB News, which is kind of our closest approximation of a center-right news organization, but that's brand new. And
I've never even heard of it even. Yeah, it must be marginal.
And Andrew Doyle has got a show on there, which is really, really good. But yeah, you know, it's very much homogenous because it's a smaller country. There's fewer people there. And I've got this Dali story in my head that I need to tell you before it goes away.
Okay. It's the persistence of memory. Go ahead.
Did you know about how he got his wife that he called his muse? Have you heard this one?
No, I've not.
So he fell in love with a woman who was currently in a marriage, and he considered her to be his muse. He courted her, decided that she was going to break off the marriage, married her. He immediately bought her a castle and started treating her like a queen. So he buys her this castle. She lives in it. She's got servants. She's got assistants, but he doesn't live with her. And he sends her formal requests to visit her that she then has to reply to and accept to let him go. So he treats her almost as sort of this semi-deity position. And he really wraps this muse that he fully commits to the muse idea. Man, like, I found him the research he did for that TEDx talk, learning about Dali, is one of the most fascinating guys from history. I wish that there was a better sort of contemporary book to break down everything that he's done. That would be unbelievable.
Well, there was a book that just came out. I think the author's name was Gopnik in, I believe, April, about Warhol. And it's 1,000 pages or so. And it's just really superb and very comprehensive. And the other thing that's kind of fascinating is that all these figures back then were kind of friends with each other or friendly with each other. I know Dali used to come to Warhol's factory. There's photos of them together and so on and so forth. And, of course, later Warhol and Basquiat very famously collaborated. So I think people also don't appreciate, podcasting is another one, just how insular these scenes are and how also important, speaking to what you said earlier about being yourself, how reputations spread. Because if a lot of the people who are, canceled on the internet, as opposed to like Alex Jones is kind of getting quietly uncanceled. He was on Tim, whereas some other people, the reason they're canceled isn't just because they did things that the powers that be found unacceptable. It's that no one felt the need to run interference for them because they're genuinely bad people.
I think Milo probably fell prey to doing something that was so toxic that it was a little bit difficult for anybody to stand up to then turn it back around.
I don't think that's true at all. What Milo got busted for, and I talk about this in the New Right, was something that in any other context, gay activists would be supporting, in the sense that historically speaking, young gay men would be initiated into that by older gay men because they didn't know anyone else who was gay, right? So, and they would attack heteronormativity, the idea that gay people have to have the same sort of norms that straight people do. Whereas when it was Milo and he was talking about effectively, if not statutory rape, but certainly something that was crossing the line, in other contexts, he'd be regarded as a victim or at least with some measure of empathy. But no one on either the right or left had his back after that. So I think but he could have been if it was somebody else.
Who is an example of somebody that you think has sort of slowly been pushed towards cancellation?
Oh, I don't want to name them because they're canceled, and why give them the attention because they're bad people. So, but I think this is an example of Milo another example is Judith Regan's another easy example. So Judith Regan was the queen of publishing, just absolute beast, right? And whatever I do, because I'm an asshole, whenever I go to a different show and get my hair and makeup, I always ask them who's the biggest jerk. And Judith Regan, who's not a household name, was more than once the name that the person doing the makeup brought up. And what happened is, and the list of bets, she did Rush Limbaugh's 2 books. She did Howard Stern's 2 books. This was like in the 90s, I think, but they were just absolute beasts, like millions and millions of copies sold. Then she convinced OJ to publish a book called If I Did It, where he speculates that if I killed Nicole Brown Simpson and her boyfriend, this is how I would have done it. It was effectively a confession. She got fired as a result of this, but it wasn't because of that book. It was because she had a reputation of being a complete monster, but this gave people, the publishing house, an opportunity to get rid of her. And this is something else I think people don't appreciate. A lot of times when someone gets fired for either sexual harassment or a tweet in cancel culture, it's not literally because of the tweet. It's that this gives them public cover to divest themselves of this person and not have to worry about having a lawsuit for a wrongful dismissal or something like that.
That's the legitimate reason, finally, that someone's been looking out for. Well, everyone knows that, right? Everyone's been waiting for that person that you work with to come in, to ring in sick one day too many. Oh, thank God for that. Such and such is gone because they're such an arsehole. Everyone's had that.
Yeah, but it's people don't appreciate to what extent that carries over into the public eye. That a
Yep.
lot of people who are kind of fallen by the wayside, it's not simply due to the ostensible reason. It's because there's a lot of backstory that they're not particularly privy to. So, tell me what your thoughts are of the U.S. now that you're here, as opposed to uh, beautiful England.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I realized before I even got here, but it's kind of been reinforced since I've arrived, is the UK has a really bad tall poppy syndrome. So people that break away from the norm in the UK, maybe this is because we're culturally homogenous. Maybe this is because we don't have that sort of blue sky vision, American can-do attitude, that sort of pioneer spirit. Maybe that's not still part of us. Maybe it's because we're so densely packed together that it feels a lot more like a zero-sum game to everybody. But if you start to do different things as a young kid in the UK, especially in a normal working class area without a growth-minded set of parents and friends, very quickly you'll be told, what are you doing that for? That's stupid, that's dumb, that's ridiculous. And that can stop individuals that have unique views about the world for manifesting them, because they just get tamped down. The opposite that I knew I was seeing in America from my time here was that's very much reversed. You can be whatever you want to be. There's very much an encouragement attitude here, blue sky vision, helicopter thinking, that whole thing. Now, there's an advantage and a disadvantage that I see for both groups. In the UK, when you grow up, there is very, very few people, there is far fewer people that have a victim mentality and also that have huge egos. The reason being that that's being nerfed throughout all of your childhood. You never had the opportunity to let your ego. Now, obviously, there are outliers that would like break this rule, but for the most part, that you're very humble. Imposter syndrome kicks in, but you are quite humble. The advantage you have as a American kid is that as you grow up, you believe you can be whatever you want to be. But as an adult, the difference between what you thought your potential was and perhaps where your life ends up, that starts to become more and more palpable. Hang on a second, this wasn't the future that I was promised. I was promised to be able to do this, to be able to achieve so on and so forth. And that causes a discontinuity. I think that's one of the reasons that we've got in the US at the moment some challenges. But I mean, specifically in Austin, man, I don't think I've ever been anywhere where people are so friendly and so encouraging. Now, I understand my Uber driver yesterday told me the average age in Austin's 27. And
is that right?
Apparently.
Holy crap, okay.
And 65,000 people moved here last year. Okay. It's like 100 and something people per day moved here last year. So basically everybody is a cultural refugee. We were at dinner the other night and we were asking around the table, how long have you been here? And how long have you been here? And how long have you been here? Basically no one had been there for longer than 18 months. So that skews it a little bit. Everyone's on the lookout for friends, but it's a really, really beautiful change. Man, you go to a bar and you sit down, and maybe the accent is a bit of an opener to this, but sit down and order a drink, and the person next to you will say, hey, where are you from? You're like, wow, that is such a shock to me, because in the UK, that would never, ever, ever happen. Sat in the sauna at Kuya, which is this place I still need to take you to. I adore it. Sat in there, the number of times that I've made friends, and they've said, oh, we've got an event on Thursday. Why don't you come to this thing that we're doing? Or, oh, I'm the head chef of the hottest sushi bar in Austin. If you want to come down, just give me a message, or I do this, or I do that. Like, it really does feel, and it's so cringe for me to now be the guy that's singing the song that all the people that have been in Austin for this long were singing. Like, oh, it's just different, and there's this sort of growth-minded thing. And I can see where everyone was coming from. There is very much a...
Why is that cringe?
Well, just that it would have been nice to have come out here and realized I had a heterodox opinion about the way that the city was pieced together, or at least have a unique opinion about it. But I don't. I'm just sort of singing from the same hymn sheet as everybody else, because it really is it's a gorgeous place to be.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. When I first started doing television appearances, my motto was say something original or say something unoriginal in an original way. So I can see how there would be a reticence on your part to be singing, like you said, from the same hymn book as everybody else. But I can confirm my perception has been the same as yours. I am shocked to what extent there seems to be this sense of community. And we had Friendsgiving. Like, no, everyone there was my friends, but they didn't really know each other. We're friends with Blair White. And what I realized was, and Blair validated this as well, coming from Los Angeles, you can't really do that in New York, in the sense of when you meet people in New York, you have to have your guard up. Like, who is this person? Are they going to be annoying? Are they going to be, some SJW? Is there going to be, do they know people I know? Like, you really kind of have to suss them out. And here, you can really have your guard down, in the sense that when people talk about like immigration from other countries, these aren't random people who are immigrating. They're going to be people who, it takes a certain something, whether positive or negative, to be like, I'm going to take my whole family and cross an ocean and move to a country I've never been before. That whether it's good or bad, this is not something that the average person even ever contemplates, leaving their town, let alone their country. So I think having everyone made that conscious decision to come here, especially when it's not intuitive. Like, intuitively, if you're going to go to New York, you're going to go to America, you're going to make it New York, you're going to make it LA, maybe Washington if you're into politics. That's the list. No one's like, I can't wait to come to America and live in Boston. And that's no disrespect to Boston, but it's not a thing. But now Austin has, quietly made that happen.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, that's such an interesting thought, that even if you have refugees from different countries, all of those people from different countries have some sort of common trait that ties them all together.
Yeah.
Some particular motivation which has drawn them to be able to be the sort of person or family that can make this choice. And yeah, perhaps that's it. Perhaps it's the fact that people from different backgrounds, different countries, different genders, different political leanings. Well, actually, different political leanings. I'm yet to see anything SJWE over here. And I've heard that Austin's supposed to be the most progressive, woke
I'm not seeing
city in Texas. Where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's nice as well, to think that people can be binded together, or they can be bound together more by their view of life, their view of the world, their motivations, what they want to try and achieve, than anything else. You can have me and a PT and a sushi chef sat in a sauna, and we all have stuff to talk about. And what have I got in common with a sushi chef? Absolutely nothing. But it works.
For 2 years now, you and I were supposed to have gone to my motherland, the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union,
Russia
and Ukraine.
Russia.
And now that's like another. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. It's kind of makes me sad, because I was very excited about it. I'm currently writing about it for the White Pill. It's very disturbing. What were you? Have you ever been there at all?
No, never, man. Never. The closest I've been is Poland.
Okay.
Like, so just going that way, really, for Brits going on holiday to Europe, going further east isn't a thing. We want to go as far south as possible and try and catch some sun.
Yeah, Mallorca, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, Spain, Mallorca, the Canary Islands, Lanzarote and stuff.
So wait, what brought you to Poland?
I was a college trip. They were just going over there for a weekend, and we were like, yeah, sure.
Where'd you go?
I can't even remember. It was 15, 16 years ago. We were just drunk. We were drunk for the entire time. You're 17 on a bus. All that you're doing is drinking.
I really hope you guys didn't go to Auschwitz.
No.
Because that would have been just throwing
leathered in Auschwitz.
Yeah. Leathered? Is that what you guys call it?
Like drunk, yeah. Battered, leathered.
Okay. Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Do you ever feel like you're being followed around the internet and maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you? So IPVanish VPN is here to help you take back your privacy, or as Chris would call it, your privacy, and become anonymous on the internet. So what a VPN is, it's a virtual private network. You can use it on your computer, tablet, phone, even a Fire Stick if you're streaming media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, those websites you're going to, what you're watching, whatever it is you're doing. And that's important, because what you're doing is no one's business but yours. For listeners of the show, IPVanish is offering 65% off their annual plan. It's only $375 a month. Super easy to use. Turn it on with one click, and it runs in the background. If you do run into a problem, you boomers, no problem. They got 24/7 support by email, chat, and phone. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice and use promo code malice, you get your 65% off savings. This is the time to sign up. IPVanish is also the best of the best. They've got a 4.7 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot with more than 6,000 reviews. Go to ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting your online anonymity. Hey guys, want to take a second and talk to you about Fume. It's a sponsor that I really think is great. Let me give you the URL heads up. If you go to breathefume.com, breathefum.com, and use promo code Malice, you get 10% off. What is Fume? Fume is the #1 natural way to quit smoking. They take the benefits of super plants, behavioral science, and design to make quitting smoking a bit easier. What you get is a fume. It's carved out of Canadian wood. And then you have these super plants, these cores that you stick in the end. So you have that replacement hand-to-mouth motion that smokers are kind of making a habit of. It's a great way to have an in-between step between smoking and going cold turkey, which is too much for many people. And now they sent me one. It's really cool. They have a 2021 holiday box with 4 unique cores. One is candy cane, one is eggnog, one is spiced orange, and one is snickerdoodle. Yes, we can call each other that. Only limited to 1,500. If you go to breathefume.com, breathefum.com, promo code Malice, you get 10% off. And it's a great way to also save money because smoking is expensive on the wallet and on the lungs. So please do check them out and take care of your health. Let's get back to the show. You have gotten some of the greatest thinkers of our time on your show. And this is going to be a big question, but something you always put on your Instagram are things that you've learned, right? And how you orient your show is you're very much about having, I have this amazing guest who has an amazing mind. Let me pick at his brain and expose it to the audience, as opposed to me, Chris Williamson, putting my, perspective necessarily across. What have been some of the biggest takeaways that you've learned from your show in 2021? Because you've had some like major heavyweights.
Yes, I mean, the Jordan Peterson episode stands out as a special one. I'll give you the link and you can put it in the show notes or whatever if anyone wants to go and check that out, because it was a really, really good episode. During the research for that, I came across this tiny little section from one of his lectures where he says, don't practice what you do not want to become. And that, that refers to the fact that every action that you make is a vote for the type of person that you're going to be in the future. If you want to be a fit person in 6 months' time, your decision to go to the gym or not to go to the gym today just nudges you ever so slightly toward that. And every time that you make the decision to go or not to go, you make the chances of you not going or going tomorrow either higher or lower. So it's ruthless. The way that habits work in our mind, you don't get to choose not to make a habit. You simply get to choose what type of habit you want to make. And that realization it kind of lends a degree of seriousness to all of the things that we do, how we spend our days. And that to me I quite like that. I quite like that seriousness. Okay, if I want to hit snooze today, it's going to be harder for me to not hit snooze tomorrow. And the same rolls forward for everything. So that was a really good insight. Aubrey Marcus asked a really beautiful question. One of my buddies went and took some psilocybin and sat on a rock and listened to Hans Zimmer. He's quite successful. And he had a question come up, which was, do people love you for who you are, or do people love you for what you do? And I mentioned this.
Good question.
Fucking amazing question, man.
Yeah.
So that's the first stage. I mentioned this story to Aubrey, who's like king of the psychedelics. And he said, okay, let me turn it round. Do you love you for who you are, or do you love you for what you do? Because we're asking the world to love us for who we are. Meanwhile, we love ourselves contingent on what we do. We're asking the world to do something that many of us yet haven't done, that our self-love is predicated on our next achievement, on our next whatever it might be. We want the world to love us for who we are, not for what we do. Meanwhile, we're going to love us for what we do, not who we are.
Let's break this down, because this is what, sometimes I give talks on networking, and I'm a big fan, as people in the audience know, of Albert Camus, and his philosophy can be described as absurdism. And the analogy I use, and I think I got this from him, but I didn't see a source, so maybe I made it up myself and I'm ascribing it to him. But the principle he had is that life is essentially meaningless, but that this is a wonderfully liberating thing, because now we are free to ascribe whatever meaning we like to it. And the analogy is, if you're on a mountainside and you come across an easel with a blank canvas, there's 2 ways of looking at this. What the hell is this easel doing on this mountainside? Or what an amazing opportunity. I can paint the river. I can paint this little flower. I can do a self-portrait. I can make something fantastical. It's infinite. And I have that ability, and I shouldn't squander this, amazing opportunity. And when I gave that talk about networking, I told people, if you are ever in a chance and you know someone is in town and it's their birthday, take them out for dinner. And I say to them, I do this for yourself. And the audience always laugh. And I go, it sounds humorous, but it's true, because the guy who takes people out for their birthday is awesome. And that could be you. There's nothing stopping you. The only thing that's stopping you is thinking of it. And then the $50, well, now it's probably 70 because of inflation, but restaurant bill. And we all have that capacity to be more of the person we would like to be. And in many cases, it's really not that hard. The reason Ego and Hubris, my biography, got published was because Ted Hope, who was the producer of the Harvey Pekar movie American Splendor, sent out an email to his company. I'm trying. Your accent's creeping in. I almost said company. To his company that said, Harvey's in town with nothing to do. If you want to hang out with him, this is your chance. And I'm the only one who took him up on that. So just think about this. You're working at a production company. You have a chance to talk to someone who has a movie made about him that your company made. Maybe you're going to have to stay an extra hour to make up for lunch. This costs you nothing, and no one thinks in those terms. So, I also think I hate it when people do this with my questions. There might be a bit of a disconnect between, especially with jobs like you and I have, between who you are and what you do, because I put a lot of myself into my work, and I don't know where I would even draw that line.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. It's specifically for people that put themselves out there, because what that question is trying to ask you is there a disconnect in how you present yourself to the world and what people think you are versus what you genuinely are inside? I think that's kind of what that story is trying to get at. Your point there about networking is so important. The fact that a tiny little rule, a rule of, if somebody's in town and you have the opportunity to meet them and you think they're interesting, just go for it. Don't really think about it too much. The fact that, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 operating principles like that, just common situations. If you're struggling to make progress on a very, very large project, think about what the tiniest next physical action movement is that you can do to break that down. So you need to write a big report, open the laptop, then I need to create the Word document, then I need to do whatever, right? You could walk to the moon given enough time and enough steps, basically. If you have 30 of those operating principles throughout your life, I find it so interesting that you can have the desire, you can be the type of person that would have taken that guy out for lunch in any case, but if you didn't have the principle to think, I need to do that. And I think that this is where internet culture and sort of education, learning online, especially where you get to, someone like you that's been through a bunch of different jobs and a bunch of different lives, I think that that's the best thing that people can do. Try and synthesize, okay, what are the real takeaways? Yeah, it's cool to understand philosophies, but to change your entire worldview and your philosophy around how life works, that's good. It's a long road, right? It's iteration by iteration. But someone can take away today the lesson, don't practice what you do not want to become. Or if somebody's in town, take them for dinner. Or don't hit snooze when you wake up on the morning, whatever it might be. Like, those are the things that you can have an immediate impact on. And I think that, yeah, it just fascinates me to think about how many people's capacity is being capped by not having enough operating principles that allow them to deploy what they want to do physically into the world effectively.
And also the problem is, when you're young, you're asking for advice with your stupid friends who have no idea what they're talking about either, but they want to be helpful and supportive. So they're just going to repeat platitudes that you've heard already. And it becomes this loop of idiocy that is very, very frustrating. Now that I've thought about it a little bit, I would definitely say I prefer to be liked for my work than for who I am, because my work is much more important than I am. And if people don't like me as a person, I don't really care. Or if people do like me as a person, I'd rather they not. I was at an event last month, and every single person there was very friendly to me. They were very respectful and kind, and it was still very overwhelming. I was exhausted afterwards. It was not a pleasant I don't want to say it wasn't pleasant, but it was just draining. There was a high cost. And again, there was no downsides. Like, it wasn't like, people in my face, they weren't trying to riff with me. Everyone just was perfect, with like one exception out of hundreds, but it was still just, as an introvert, just very, very draining. Whereas I'd rather they all were indifferent to me but especially the upcoming book, The White Pill, that they read it and take something away from that. I'm not as important as the story that I'm telling in that book.
That's interesting that you can get to the stage where you think that your work transcends the person that you are.
It's much more important if I'm talking about genocide.
Do you not think that it's significantly more fragile, though, that if you decide to do your next book and your next book sucks, and now people think that you suck, your entire body of work is based, or your entire self-worth is predicated on the most recent, because people have got availability bias, recency bias, blah, 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 blah. Sure. I think it's so much more fragile to do that. Don't get me wrong. I think that we should have bodies of work that contribute to who we are, but hinging our sense of self-worth, which is, I guess,
I didn't say my sense of self-worth.
I understand, but that's the subtext that's below that. Do people love you for who you are or for what you do? And then the implication from that, I think, is that will impact whether or not I love me for who I am or for what I do. That was how Aubrey turned it around.
No. So there's something called a locus of control. A locus of control is, to a psychological term, is to what extent is your sense of self based on internal or external factors. And when I took this test in college, it turned out, and I'm not surprised, that my locus of control is completely internal. Meaning I think that's kind of changed now that I've been more open and have a bigger support group. But the idea was, I don't care if strangers like me or don't like me. It's flattering when they like me. I don't really, I enjoy, it's also a little bit flattering when they don't like me, because then I get to rile them up and watch them spurg out. But if you ask, my work is is my legacy. And I can't wrap my head around the idea that if I'm telling the story of, what people went through under the Stasi or Stalinism, that this is about me. It's not about me at all. This is me being very privileged in the correct sense to be able to give testimony towards, amazing people who both suffered and conquered the forces of evil.
Can I give you a couple more things from this year that I've learned?
Sure, please.
So there's a quote from John Maxwell that says,
wait, before we do that, if I never do another book, or the rest of my books suck, or they're bombs, I don't think anyone who cares about me on a personal level, who I have a relationship with, it would affect them.
So people love you for who you are, not for what you do.
If my next book was, you read it and you hated it, right? You personally, maybe it would make you respect me a little bit less as an author, as an intellectual. I don't think this would affect our friendship.
Well, that's because I love you for who you are, not for what you do.
Right. But that's my point, meaning the relationship I have with people who actually know me, and the relationship with, the audience at large, these are different dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Well, the concern is when the lines between those get blurred, right? When your friends love you contingently on who you have access to, what your success is.
Well, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's the story of every, who was it? Avicii, that DJ that was hugely successful across the entire world, but had a manager that pushed him too hard and a bunch of people around him that were just yes men. He was breaking down mentally, and they just continued to push him and push him and push him, and then he took his own life. People. Yeah. So you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. So it's a John Maxwell quote that synthesizes Greg McKeown's essentialism, which is that almost all of the things that you do and you focus your time on are probably pointless toward your genuine long-term goals, and that the best productivity tool is to get really, really, really clear about what you want in life, and to then just ruthlessly cull everything else that doesn't contribute to it. I'm adamant that that's the number one productivity tool if you want to get really, really good, really fast. Look at all of the things that you do. Are they contributing to the thing that you actually care about, or are they just fluff that gets in the way?
But I think a lot of times we also need downtime. So what seems like fluff, like I watched some stupid TV show or a video game walkthrough, that is of use, just like with lifting. If you're someone who doesn't have rest days, you're an idiot, because it's not better to be lifting 7 days a week and going 3 hours a day. You're just being counterproductive. So even though mentally you could think I'm getting rid of the fluff and sitting on my couch, you need that sitting on the couch.
That's still a part of the importance of everything, though. If you want to be the best that you can be, you just need a broader view of what that is. What I'm saying is that people shouldn't decide to start 3 different projects at once.
Right.
It's not about not taking time off. It's about focusing your attention into being the best that you can be at the thing that you've chosen to be the best at. And there's another one as well here that I guess is quite timely. So this is a Douglas Murray one. When the barbarians are at the door, we'll be debating about what gender they are. And this is a comment on the fact that there are some really, really heinous people out there who've got some pretty scary things. I've got Jamie Metzel coming on the show tomorrow, and I'm really interested to talk about China and their anti-American propaganda and the crazy stuff they're doing with social media algorithms and all sorts of interesting things. Meanwhile, the decadent West is getting caught up thinking about stuff that basically leaves you vulnerable to some really, really bad actors and may actually be in service of those really bad actors.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pedicy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying, Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, this also speaks to, and I'm not trying to put, this reminds me of a story with the building of the atom bomb, because the argument for fascism was we're all organized, we all became one nation under one leader, so we don't have this decadent, wasteful, Western fat people on the recliner eating fried chicken. And there was a Nazi who was captured, a Nazi nuclear scientist, and he didn't even realize how far ahead the U.S. was in building an atom bomb. I don't think they even knew we were building for one. And of course, this was a big concern with the Manhattan Project, because if Hitler got the atom bomb, things would get very, very nasty indeed very, very quickly. And he was sitting at some scientist's office and just pontificating because of his inherent Aryan superiority. And the guy had a paperweight, and the Nazi goes, all right, let's suppose this was uranium-181 or whatever the number was. And he picks up the paperweight, and it was. He's like, oh, because he felt from the weight. And that was this great moment where it's like your system of Superman really isn't as great as it's touted to be. So I think there's a big fear in America that since the Chinese, kind of maybe have this, but it's easier when someone's a boogeyman to ascribe them supernatural or superhuman powers, that they're very focused, and we're kind of, arguing about gender. But a lot of times having all these arguments, we have our shit together a lot more than people realize.
That's a cool story.
Because it's a lot easier to think that the guy outside is scarier, because familiarity, it's like, we know Americans, like, they're not that impressive, whereas this ominous, Chinese tiger, it's going to come and get us.
Well, I mean, that's also part of China's propaganda wing, right? It's to appear as strong as possible to try and give off that. I mean, especially as you're Russia, you'll understand that that's, to me, based on what I know about the country, it seems like that show of force, of strength, resiliency is very core, not only to the individuals that live there, but culturally and governmentally as well, in terms of how they want to be perceived on the world stage. I mean, this was the reason for covering up Chernobyl, was it not? The fact that they didn't want to look incompetent, and it was just layers and layers of people all the way up, desperately trying to not look incompetent to the person above them, and then when it reaches the top, trying to not look incompetent on the world stage.
And that's also the reason why Putin is one of the big reasons Putin's so popular, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the loss of Russia as the rivalrous superpower to the United States, all of a sudden Putin made Russians feel like badasses again. People are scared of Russia. People are talking about
topless
Russia.
Photos, riding on a horse.
Yeah. So what are some of the other things that you've learned in this past year?
Yeah. Okay. So what's a good one here? Perfectionism is procrastination masquerading as quality control. This is a really good lesson. A paradoxical thing about people who consistently choose the most high leverage activity is that their efforts have a rough-edged, half-arsed quality, because polishing things to perfection is a low leverage activity.
Yes, that's why you have a proofreader.
Yep.
Because if I have typos in my books, which I do, it's the job of the proofreader, not the author. And I always tell the kids, and I'm sure you're going to back me up on this because you've hired a lot of people in your lifetime, don't aspire to excellence, aspire to competence. Because when you're young, you're not going to be able to be excellent. But if you're someone and you're an intern or someone assistant and you're competent, I can give you this and I can, get rid of it from my brain. And I know you're going to return it in workable shape. You're a hero and you're going to be at the 80th percentile.
Well, that's the thing as well, that you need to be able to ship whatever it is that you're doing. Let's say that you want to get a partner, so you want to go out dating, but you're not going to go out dating until you've got the perfect tan, until you've got the perfect hair, until you're the perfect body fat percentage. It's much better for you to just iterate on the experience of dating and get that experience in. The same thing goes for podcasting. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. And
is that true? 90%?
And of the 10% that do, 90% don't make it past episode 20. So by making 21 podcast episodes, you were in the top percentile of all podcasters ever.
Holy crap. I can't even get my nice camera to work. And I'm in like the top 50 because my computer's so crap and I'm waiting for a new computer. I don't know why. As we were talking before we started recording, like for some reason this fancy camera doesn't work in Austin. And I have to work my old camera so I look like I'm underwater or something like that. And but I mean, it would be very easy for me to tell myself, what's the point? I don't have my nice
perfect camera's not there.
Yeah, so no one's going to watch this. People aren't going to watch it because my content is so terrible and because I'm uniquely unlikable. It's not the camera. It's the the despicable host.
Here's another one. So Ryan Long, who is a comedian, really fucking smart guy, man. Like Ryan's smart because he comes across like such a bro. He was in this huge ska punk band when he was 17. He's Canadian, and now he's crushing it on social media. And the lesson I got from him was the bleeding edge of internet culture can predict downfalls 6 to 12 months before most normies even realize. So a really good example of this was Dan Bilzerian. If you looked on the internet at the guys that are really got their finger on the pulse of the bleeding edge of internet culture, Philion, Tom Nash, really just out there YouTubers that they live on Reddit and they've probably got a 4chan account and stuff like that.
I've heard of literally none of these people, but go ahead.
Well, that's why, right? Because they're niche-y. But if you watch their stuff, they knew 18 months ago that Dan Bilzerian was a kind of a bit of a man-child.
I don't know who he is either.
He's the owner of Ignite. He's kind of like a Hugh Hefner type guy. Okay. He's got all of these girls around him, and he's got this very sort of extravagant lifestyle on Instagram. And it's like a 15-year-old boy's idea of what an amazing life would be like. And there was a period where his
you mean like Models and Bottles?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
But on a super scale, like yachts, flying 100 girls out for a photo shoot. It's with money as well, right? So supercharged. And they were able to predict the fact that this guy's a man-child. Like he's very simple. It's not cool. He's really cringe. And sure enough, 18 months later, 12 months later, the accounts come out about his company Ignite, this CBD THC company, and they don't look too good. And there's a bunch of questions about where the money's going and where it's come from. The house that he owned, this $65 million house in LA, turns out to be rented. And that was being run through the company accounts. And you just see this thing happen. So Ryan, as one of these guys that has his finger on the pulse, is able to predict these downfalls. So it's not that people can't see what's going to happen. It's that you need to be more attuned to the trends, that you need to find the right people. I mean, me and you, sometimes some of the phone calls that we've had a year ago, 18 months ago, and these things that we said on the phone then are coming true now. We're watching them unfold in front of our eyes with different creators, with different companies, with different people's ascension and descension. It's just finding the right signals. And from there, I think it's almost like divinity or clairvoyance. You just need the right people to tell you what's going on.
Yeah. So there's the line about how when technology is far advanced enough, it's indistinguishable from magic. And my kind of corollary to that is when intelligence is advanced enough, it's indistinguishable from telepathy. So if you look at a dog, you know what a dog's thinking, right? And at a certain point, when you talk to average people, there's not much going on upstairs, and you can effectively read their minds. And like a lot of times on Twitter, I will make a claim, and then within minutes or a couple of days, someone will make that claim. Once you understand the programming, it's not that hard to predict the output. It's just being an engineer, but instead of engineering code like Lex, you're engineering humans, which are not as complex as people would like us to think sometimes.
When intelligence is sufficiently advanced, it's indistinguishable from telepathy. Yeah. That's such a bomb, man. Like, I love that.
But am I wrong?
No, not at all. I mean, this is why you're not wrong. What you need if you want to be someone, I enjoy understanding this shit, right? So I enjoy having my fingers sort of attached to these people who can feed me things. It's interesting.
Of course.
What I would say is that someone's ability to understand one particular domain doesn't always port across, or rarely ports across into all other domains, which
Correct.
is why you need a broad set of social circles. It's why you need the content that you consume online to be very diverse as well. Here's a final one that I think is really interesting. So imposter syndrome is a feature of a bug. Imposter syndrome is a feature, not a bug, of growing as a person. So this was me talking to Seth Godin, marketing guy, inducted into the Hall of Fame for marketing. And I mentioned, how do people deal with imposter syndrome in your idea? And he said, well, if you're doing something that you've never done, or potentially that someone has never done before in the history of the world, or definitely within your particular time, why wouldn't you feel like an imposter? You have every reason to feel like an imposter. You have no idea whether or not you can achieve this thing. You don't even know if it can be done. If you've never done a thing before, why would you think that you're going to be capable of doing it? So the imposter syndrome is a reminder that you're pushing the proximal zone of development, that you're getting yourself into a new area. That's not to say that imposter syndrome is good, but it's that for the people who do suffer with it, a lot of the time they're told, oh, you shouldn't have imposter syndrome. You should feel like your competence is able to get you as far as you want. However, if you've never done this thing before, especially if you're on the come up, if you're a younger guy or a younger girl who's doing something for the first time, how do you have no proof. Imposter syndrome is a feature, not a bug, of doing something for the first time.
This is so interesting because in the same way that you and I talked about my body dysmorphia and it just did not emotionally resonate with you, like imposter syndrome, like I'm understanding the words you're saying, but emotionally it just seems like Klingon. Like none of that has emotional resonance to me, and I don't know why that is, but it's just there's so many, whatever you're trying to do, there's so many people who are doing that thing who are complete clowns and frauds. Let's suppose like you want to be someone who talks about politics. And everyone listening to this right now can, off the top of their head, can think of 3 people who talk politics who have no business talking politics. So when you have the bar set that low, you can't be an imposter. All you have to be is, can I be better at this than Brian Stelter? And when you say in those terms, it's like, well, yeah, it's not that hard. You just have to not look as much like a potato.
Well, I went on the bayou in New Orleans hunting gators, and as we got onto the boat, the guy that was driving the boat said, don't forget that if you fall in, you don't need to swim faster than the gator. You just need to swim faster than the man next to you.
Yeah. But that's the joke about the 2 guys are in a tent and the bear comes in and one of them starts putting on his sneakers and he goes, you really think you can outrun the bear? He's like, no, I just have to outrun you. That's the joke. So do you still think of yourself as having imposter syndrome? Like when you were talking to these like kind of podcasting heavyweights, are you mentioned that to me, in our private conversation, that a lot of times you feel like you're playing catch up. Is that still the case?
No, far less so, which is really cool. Because I've watched the trajectory move, right? I've watched myself go from someone that felt like, what the fuck am I doing in a room with Jordan Peterson or Ryan Holiday or Robert Greene or Michael Malice or whatever, to now feeling like if I sit down for dinner opposite Lex and Lex tells me about the episodes that he's really enjoyed of mine over the last year, and I tell him about the questions that I think were really good of his, that just feels like something normal. And it's cool.
I programmed him because I felt bad for you.
Oh, you're cute. I'm trying to work out what your Russian secret agent activation code is. So these sleeper agents? I'm going to try and work out what it is. And I think that it's going to be something that very few people would ever say.
You wouldn't be able to pronounce it anyway.
What, the Chief Constable of West Hampshire Police? Are you sure it's not that?
Yes.
I think you've got. I'm pretty adamant that you've got an activation code because you're a sleeper agent, and all that I need to do is find out what it is, and it makes you totally spurg out.
But that happened when someone glitter bombed my house. That totally got me to spurg out.
What?
Someone glitter bombed my house on New Year's. That was a spurg out. I don't know what would cause me to. See, if you activate a Russian, it's often. I got into an argument over the weekend with someone who was saying some pretty nasty things to me, and they forgot who they were talking to, and I just was gloves off, went for the jugular, as I probably might say, and I felt a little bit bad after, but it's like, don't start fights you can't finish is the situation.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I don't drink, because then I do start and finish things.
Were you drinking?
No, I wasn't. I'm just saying this is why I refrain from drinking, because then that's my activation. Then the sleeper agent comes out and there's just blood everywhere. And the next day I feel bad because I'm not cleaning that shit up. Chris, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Speaking to my friend Michael while we're in the same city, but using the internet.
Pip, pip, cheerio.
Looking for a way to make some quick cash? Well, making money with DoorDash is super easy, guys. I love riding my bike around the city, and now I get to do that while getting paid. With DoorDash, I get to pick my own hours and be my own boss. I get paid on my deliveries and keep 100% of my tips. Not to mention the sign-up process was so quick and easy. Guys, I'm telling you, just download the DoorDash driver app and see how easy it is to start earning cash today.